All right, let's start off by saying Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem B'cha Kodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is called Creditors. Now, what is a creditor? Let's go to the offline dictionary. And the word creditor is a person to whom money is owed by a debtor, someone to whom an obligation exists. I read it again. Creditor, a person to whom money is owed by a debtor, someone to whom an obligation exists. And pretty much this lesson was inspired I was trying to read a chapter this morning. I ended up only reading one verse, and from that one verse the Spirit gave me a lesson, and eventually we'll get to that chapter, which I still didn't read it, only read the first verse. It'll show you how the Spirit works. But this is pretty much the lesson that came up, and we've gone over this many times. We've spoken about debt slavery, to where one becomes a slave based off of debt. This is in the scriptures, and this is something that has happened throughout history, and this is something that the international banking families have used to pretty much put into subjection the population of the world, because they know that most people don't have the funds that they have. The scriptures say about these devils that they have more than heart could wish. And through the wisdom that these devils have, through their covetousness, their greed, their arrogance, their pride, they pretty much have formulated a system in place to where it has the world in such debt that that debt can never be repaid. So what is the outcome of that debt, or how do you heal that debt, or how do you make that debt right or pay that debt off? Well, the only way possible is by giving up people's lands and themselves as slaves, which we have an example of that in the scriptures when we go back to Egypt during the time when Joseph was the second in command underneath the Pharaoh. And Pharaoh had a series of dreams, or two dreams, that pretty much meant the same thing. The Spirit revealed to Joseph what those dreams meant. He broke it down to the Pharaoh about the 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. And he set up Joseph with the task of collecting and storing for the 7 years of plenteous, collecting and storing this grain, this corn, in order to build up and have storehouses for Egypt and the Pharaoh and them to be sustained. And this was all set up through the Spirit of the Lord, so that Joseph, his father Jacob, and his brothers and the Israelites could be taken care of. That's why he was put in that position. So building off of that, that is the same thing that's going on today. But the only thing is that the way it's going on today is going on today through manipulation. Let's look up that word manipulation, and then we'll get to the first scripture. The word manipulation. Let's put manipulate. The word manipulate is influence or control, shrewdly or deviously. Hold something in one's hand and move it, tamper with the purpose of deception, manipulate in a fraudulent manner, control others or oneself, or influence skillfully usually to one's advantage. So let's read that first one again. Influence or control shrewdly or deviously. So how did they do that? Well, the manipulation came through the money system. And the money system, which was centralized through a central bank, which there were 3 central banks in America. The first and the second were done away with after their charters, which were 20 years apiece, were done away with. And the third one, the third central bank, which is still prevalent over 100 years later, was set up as a seemingly governmental agency called the Federal Reserve. And through the Federal Reserve, the power of coining money, which is real money, was taken away in the issuance of paper dollars from a privately owned banking cartel. All right, and this privately owned banking cartel is known or are known as the international bankers, which the scriptures call the rich men. Now let's go to the book of James 5:1. It says, "Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you." Yeah, and all you have to do if you want to get a little better understanding of that is read the book of Luke 16, where it speaks about the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, which is a future setting, you know, of the banking elite, the Edomites, being in slavery, suffering slavery underneath Lazarus, which represents the poor, which represents the Israelites, so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians. And that will give you a scenario as to the future of Esau and the other nations, especially their higher-ups. Because the first crop of slaves will be the international banking families, the top Edomite banking families, the top Moabite banking families, the top of the other nations' banking families. But at the top of the pile is going to be Esau. You know, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the DuPonts, the Gettys, so on and so forth. They're going to be the top main devils that go into slavery and captivity. And that's what the parable of Lazarus and the rich man is all about. The dogs in that parable being a representation of these nations that lick the swords of Jake by, after Esau does all the raping and pillaging and taxation and all that, they come in afterwards through their Chinese restaurants or whatever other restaurants they have out there and their goods, and take the little bit left out of Jake. That's a part of licking the swords. So the Lord is telling them to prepare for what's coming. And the what's coming is what? The miseries that shall come upon you. But now, why are these miseries going to come upon them? Well, where do we start? There's so many ways and reasons and things and stuff that Esau has done. You know, the main one is putting his hands on the children of Israel. You know, the raping, the robbing, the murdering, the pillaging, you know, the deceptions, their manipulation, their legislation, the way that they've so-called lend upon usury, and stole people's resources, lands, you know, labor for nothing. You know, that's just some of the things that you have to pay for. So these are the things you have to howl for. Then it goes on to say, your riches are corrupted and your garments are moth-eaten, meaning that the way that you got these riches was not by right. There's a term called ill-gotten gains. You know, ill-gotten gains is pretty much goods that were gotten by a way that was not right. Let's go real quick to the book of Ecclesiasticus 10 and 8. And it reads, because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit, ill-gotten gains, the kingdom is translated from one people to another. So pretty much right now, all of these riches that are in place that you have stolen from the world. You're pretty much hoarding them right now, but pretty much you could just say that you're holding on to these goods for us. Because when you read Isaiah the 60th chapter, these nations are going to be bringing their riches to Israel, to Jerusalem. And you're pretty much just keeping it warm. Inside joke. Keep everything warm. Let me get this other precept. This is Ecclesiastes 8 and 9. All this have I seen, and applied my heart unto every work that is done under the sun. There is a time wherein one man ruleth over another to his own hurt. And we know there's many scriptures that deal with, having someone in slavery. You reap what you sow, so on and so forth. So that's your future. That's what you're heading for. That's what you're heading towards, is the miseries that are going to come upon you, because the way you got these riches, was by ill-gotten gains. It says your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you. Yeah, and what is the rust of them that's going to be a witness against you? All of the treachery, the underhanded things that you've done to get there. And as each day goes by, more and more dirt comes out on you devils of what you've done and how you've manipulated and how you stole and cheated the world. And people are starting to wake up to that. It says, shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Why? Because eventually your dreams and your goals of the so-called New World Order are going to go up in smoke, because America is going to be totally annihilated. And America is the catapult nation, or the catapult place that the New World Order is springing off of. Okay? It says you have heaped treasure together for the last days. Yeah, and in the book of Habakkuk, it says that you have set your nest on high. But the Lord said, woe unto you, because the way you establish this upon blood. And we read in the scriptures that if you establish, or if you shed somebody's blood, right balance is not set or restored until the person who shed that person's blood be shed. That's why there's laws on the shedding of blood. That's why there were cities of refuge and things of that nature, because the killing of someone was very detrimental, whether it was an accident or not. That's why one of the 10 commandments is what? Thou shalt not kill, which really, when you go to the Hebrew, is ratazach, which means murder. So thou shalt not murder. And that's one thing that you devils are good at, is murdering, raping, pillaging, stealing. Everything that's negative, you're good at. So it goes on to say, behold, the hire of the laborers. See, now we're getting into the meat of it. The hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you, kept back by fraud, crieth, and the cries of them have entered in, and the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. So the laborers are the ones that are working. So you being in power, you having that position of authority, you are the ones that are in a position to lend, to hire, to distribute. And it's in your power to do the right thing, but you don't do the right thing. That's why you have all type of fees. You have all type of taxation. Just things to continually keep your pockets lined and keep the poor of the people poorer and poorer. I just watching a video. Elder Pastor did a short video on this woman, this so-called black woman, this Israelite woman, who had degrees, and she's homeless. She's been homeless for the last 2 years. I'm not sure what date that video was posted, if that's older, if she's still in that condition, if that's something new. But the point is that here it is. She thought that by going to school, that whole American dream that was promised, you get an education, you're going to be okay because your future is set. Those people that don't get an education, their future is not set. Their future is uncertain. They're lazy. They don't want to get off their duff. But here it is, you so-called got off your duff, got into serious, heavy debt, got you a good degree, had a good job, but then a few things happened financially where it put you in the poorhouse. Now, my first thought and reaction to it, to be totally honest, was good for you, and I'm explaining why I thought that thought. Because the first thing that entered into my mind was, how did this woman, which I don't have proof, maybe she didn't, or maybe she did, this is just my reasoning, how did this woman treat the poor and look at them before she was in that position? See, because once she got to the homeless position, she started to understand and be sympathetic towards the plight of the homeless. Why? Because she was in that situation. She got a chance to talk to some of them. She got a chance to see the beauty of how, of these people, although they're in that downtrodden position. But how did she view them before that? Did she look down upon them? Did she talk down to them? Was she the type that looks somebody in the street, needs some money to get something to eat? Would she give it to them? Or would she just look at them like, go get a job, you lazy bum? So all these things came through my head. So if that was the case, then that's good for her. But if the case was the other way around, then hey, it's a sad thing. But ultimately, this is what this society is bred for. Like the Apostle quoted the scripture: "Cursed shall thou be when I come in, and cursed shall you be when you go out." And the scripture also says in the curse that the Lord shall put vexation on everything that you put forth your hands to do. These are curses. All right. So people are in a messed up condition. Why? Because the leaders on the top, the Edomites that are ruling, the international banking families, have the world monopolized. And the way they have the world monopolized is through a monetary system that is flawed for the people, but benefits them. Because the paper currency that they're giving people has no intrinsic value. Really the main value it has is the belief of the people, but as far as real backing, it really doesn't have real backing, because it's supposed to be backed by silver and gold, and it's not, and what happens when you have a system like that is that the dollar that you get becomes more and more devalued, to where you have to work harder and harder and have to pay more and more of that fake dollar to get what you would normally get for a particular price. That's called inflation, going into hyperinflation. And what's happening is they're making money off of nothing. So they're using usury or interest on the people, which is against the scriptures. Except for in the case of a heathen nation, which they're saying that they're the Israelites and that everybody else are just heathens. That's why that justifies them in doing it. But they are not. They are Edomites. So they have it wrong. They have it backwards. So reading on, these cries from the people that are laboring and are in this bad condition are crying to the Lord, and the Lord hears their cries. It says, "You have lived in pleasure on the earth." The parable of Lazarus and the rich man. The vision that the Apostle John saw of the harlot, and been wanton, meaning undisciplined. You have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter. Yeah, because in the day of slaughter would be what? That would be a great feast day, because that, you would kill the fatted calf. You would have all the trimmings. It would be a feast. You would have the best wine, and everything, music, dancing. So that's how they've been living. They've been living deliciously. It says, "You have condemned and killed the just, and he does not resist you." Yeah, because people are complying with you, although people are in an oppressed state. They're still complying with you. They're still following the rules and regulations. The majority of people. Now you got those that are, doing what they got to do, but for the most part, the people are complying with the rules and regulations. It says, "Be patient." Oh, that was it on that. Now let's go from there to this other precept, and then we can get to the main precept that I was speaking about earlier. This is Ecclesiasticus 13 and 19. It says, "As the wild ass is the lion's prey in the wilderness, so the rich eat up the poor." That's right. So the rich eat up the poor. So the poor, mainly the Israelites, and you have poor among the other nations, that are being exploited, but mainly the Israelites are falling prey to these devils because they understand and they know that we would be under curses, and they understand and know that we would be at the bottom, and they're using that to their advantage. So it goes on to say, it says, as the proud hate humility, so doth the rich abhor the poor. And the word abhor means to avoid. So the rich avoid the poor. And what do? They misuse them. They become rich off of the misery and the little few pennies that the poor have. I mean, you could understand if they were, even though that's still wicked, they were robbing other rich motherfuckers, But here it is, you rich, and you know that people are poor and desperate and in need, and you're still robbing from them to put it in your put it in your wallet. What's in your wallet? There was a point that came to mind, but it kind of left me, saying that little stupid little joke there. Oh yeah, the situation with King David. When you go back and you read about when King David killed Uriah the Hittite, which was an Israelite, to take his woman, Bathsheba. And Nathan used a parable of a rich man and a poor man, and how the rich man did some underhanded shit to take the poor man's lamb or something along those lines. And that made King David angry, because that is true. The rich are constantly ripping the poor off. That goes into a whole nother topic, but the point was how the rich man robbed the poor man. And that's always been the case, always. Now let's go from there to the scripture that started this whole lesson off, or the idea for the lesson, which is in the book of Isaiah. Like I said, I went to it, I opened the book, I was about to read the whole chapter, I read the first verse, and that's where, from that point on, it just went in many different directions. So let me just take a little sip of this water, Salakia. And let's get to it. Isaiah chapter 50 verse 1. It says, thus saith the Lord, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, where is the bill of your mother's divorcement, whom I have put away? Or which of my creditors is it to whom I have sold you? Behold, for your iniquities have you sold yourselves, and for your transgressions is your mother put away. So now, when you have a debt, you become indebted to who? To a creditor. And if you can't pay, what happens? You become enslaved under him. So we were free at one time, and when we transgressed the law, we became indebted to the law, and we became slaves to iniquity, to sin. This is what the Apostle Paul was speaking about. But the point of this here is what? The term creditor itself. Now, what does that term creditor mean? Let's go to the book of Isaiah, chapter 50, and verse 1. It says, creditors. The word there is nashah, to lend. Be a creditor, to lend. Creditor, to lend. Borrow on security or interest. And that's what most people do. When you borrow money, what they do is they tack on a fee, an interest fee. It happens in the banks, it happens with people that lend people money, so on and so forth. But that's against the scriptures, unless you're lending to a heathen. All right, let's see, was there anything else on there? All right, so we may come back to that. So now let's go from there to the book of Deuteronomy, because the scriptures cover everything. Deuteronomy 15, and we're going to start at the first verse. We're going to read, I believe we're going to read the whole chapter. Let's see, I'll let you know right now. Well, actually most of it. We'll see how far we can get through it. Now there's, like, when you read the scriptures, there's all different types of scenarios. All different types of laws, sub-laws. The laws are broken down into 4 categories. And I learned this from an individual who's no longer in the truth, but it was practical the way he set it up, and it's still beneficial to this day. So the law is broken down into 4 components or 4 categories, and he said MCDC. Best way to remember, MCDC: moral, civil, dietary, ceremonial. And that is those are the 4 categories of, when you read the law, that's the 4 categories they fall under. They either fall under moral, they fall under civil, they fall under dietary, or they fall under ceremonial. All right? So everything is covered in there. The law is perfect. Everything that you need to run a righteous society is there. So there's no excuse, to, I didn't know, or this, that, and the other. Excuse me. Now, you run into situations like Moses said, things that are too hard for you, because not every situation is in the scriptures, but for the most part, you have a guideline. And the thing about a judge is, the longer a judge is, presiding over situations, the more experience he has and the more ability he has to make decisions outside of the box, so to speak, that may not be necessarily found in the scriptures, because not every situation is found in the scriptures. Like, for instance, the situation with King Solomon, when the 2 women came to him and the one overlaid her baby and killed the baby, and she took her baby, the dead baby, put it with the other woman that had given birth, and she took the other woman's baby, and the other woman knew that the dead baby wasn't hers, but that the live baby was hers. And when they were arguing back and forth, King Solomon said, bring the baby and I'll chop the baby in half, and you can have half, she can have half. So the woman whose child it wasn't said, yeah, let's do that. But the woman whose child it was, she said, no, let her have the child. And based off of that, he said, give it to her. The one that said, let her have the child, that is the mother. So was that in the law? No, that was not in the law, but that was based off of judgment, off of wisdom, that he was able to do that. You see? So that was just an example. So now let's go back, Deuteronomy 15:1. At the end of every 7 years, thou shalt make a release. And this is why, at one time, I'm not sure if they still do it now, at one time, even with credit cards, if you had a credit card debt after 7 years, they would pardon your debt, no matter what. And they got that from the scriptures, because the point is that everyone falls on hard times. Everyone falls into debt at some point or another. Like that woman that had a degree, good job, she fell on hard times. So that happened to everybody at one point or another, in certain cases. So there was laws written in the scriptures to where there was a relief that was given. So it was called a year of release every 7 years, right? It says, and this is the manner of the release. Every creditor, and there's a precept there for creditor. Let's see what it says. It says, master of the lending of his hand. And it's heavy that it said that, master of the lending of his hand, because when you go to that actual scripture in Deuteronomy 15:2, the word there for creditor, there's 3 words there. The first one is Ba'al. Now the word Ba'al is husband, lord, right? Owner, husband, lord, citizen, inhabitant, ruler, rulers, lords, master of dreams. So it's a master, a ruler, right? A lord. That's one. The next one is Mashah, loan, released in the 7th year. So it was a master of loaning. It was a master of loaning, a creditor, someone that had experience and had enough money to lend to other people, right? And the last word, let's see what it says there. It says Rayai or Rai. Friend, companion, fellow, another person, intimate. All right, so that kind of goes into something else, but that's the point. The point is you had a creditor, right? And then the word lendeth is the word nashah, to lend, be a creditor, to lend. So there was a certain way, there were laws in place of the way you would lend. But these devils don't follow those laws. They don't even follow their own laws. It says, and this is the manner of the release. Every creditor that lendeth aught unto his neighbor shall release it. He shall not exact it of his neighbor nor of his brother, because it is called the Lord's release. Now you notice, every 7 years that go by, these devils never let go of the debt clock. It just keeps piling up, piling up, piling up. So what is that called? When you don't allow a debt to be released every 7 years. It's called exact. The word nagash, to press, drive, oppress, exact, exert, demanding, exert demanding pressure. Now you ever notice those guys that are, they send around to collect, they call them leg breakers or whatever the case is. Why do they do that? Because there are outstanding debts that people are not paying, and they're not taking it serious enough, so they send out these goons to break people's legs or manipulate them somehow, some way, to get that money. And that's total wickedness, and that's what these bankers are doing. Them Italians are good for that. The mafia, the mob, they're good for that. They send the leg breakers around, to tune people up so that they can pay their debt, and that's against the scriptures. So there's a lot of wickedness going on in this world. Too much wickedness will go on in the fucking earth. Inside joke. So it says, of a foreigner thou mayest exact it again. Yeah, so if you have a heathen, you could do that. But that which is thine with thy brother, thine hand shall release. Yeah, so if a brother owes you something, every 7 years you're supposed to release it. And that would set things back into proper balance. See, the thing of today, because there's no release. There's just exactment. And that exactment leads to what? Oppression. And that's what the scriptures in Isaiah 14 calls this place the golden city, or the exactress of gold. The one that demands payment. It says, save when there shall be no poor among you, for the Lord shall greatly bless thee in the land which the Lord thy power giveth thee for an inheritance to possess it. Right, so pretty much this release was mainly used for who? For the poor. Because you always had the poor, just like you had the so-called welfare system in the ancient world, which was you would leave the gleanings, you leave like a tenth on you wouldn't pluck every grape, or you wouldn't pluck every apple, or you wouldn't pluck every plum, or whatever your crops were, because you would leave certain ones for the poor of the people, so that they can, being that they were poor, they were hungry, they would be able to eat, so they could have something to eat, because the Lord always provided a way for the poor, right? And what do these devils do? They put more hell on the poor. It says, only if thou carefully hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy power, to observe to do all these commandments which I command thee this day, for the Lord thy power blessed thee, as he promised thee, and thou shalt lend unto many nations, but thou shalt not borrow. And thou shalt reign over many nations, but they shall not reign over thee. But what happened? We didn't comply, and we fell. So now, let's go to the book of Proverbs. Get a couple of precepts on that, excuse me. Proverbs 22 and 7. The rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. And there's a precept there for lender to the man that lendeth. So the borrower, the one that borrows, is servant to the lender. Who is the lender? The lender is the creditor. Let's go to that. Like I said, we've gone over these words before, but for the sake of those that may not have seen it or may not have gone over this word, let's go over it. Proverbs 22 and 7. The borrower is servant to the lender. There's two words for lender. The first one is ayash, which is man. And the second one is lawah, to join, be joined. To join, be joined. Attend, to join oneself to. Be joined unto. To borrow, lend, to borrow, to cause to borrow, to lend to. So when you join yourself to someone or lend, you know, you become a borrower, you're pretty much joining yourself to them by way of what? Debt. That's why you had something called a debt slave. And when you look up that term debt slave, is someone that was so indebted that they had to sell themselves, possibly their land or their goods, into slavery to someone else because they were just that far in debt and there was nothing that they can do. And this is what the international banking families are doing to the world financially. That's where you had the IMF, the World Bank, going around different countries, assessing the situation, telling people, well, you know what, I see you have this problem here, you're so-and-so in debt. We could give you the money to pay for it, and all you have to do is just pay us, in increments. But what happens is the money that they lend them is far beyond anything that they can pay back. Then the interest on top of that, compounding on top of that, makes it impossible for them to pay that back. So what happens? Their lands, their resources, and the people become tributary or servants to those banking institutions, like the IMF and the World Bank. And that's what you have, the oppression that you have in the world. And that's what we read in James the 5th chapter about the rich men and how they got these riches and how their gold and silver and all is cankered. And they're going to have to pay for all of that. So moving on back in Deuteronomy 15 and 7, it says, if they, before I go back to that, let's go from there to, Deuteronomy 28, same book, but let's go to the 28th chapter. And the 43rd verse. The stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. And that is exactly what we find ourselves in, that position, the tail. Hence, the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. Lazarus being the poor, the tail, and the rich man, which is Esau, being the head. The one that lends. And we be the ones that borrow. And the ones that borrow are servants to the ones that lend. All right, so now going back to Deuteronomy 15 and 7. If there be among you a poor man of one of thy brethren within any of thy gates in thy land, which the Lord thy power giveth thee, thou shalt not harden thy heart, nor shut thine hand from thy poor brother. That's right. But thou shalt open thine hand wide unto him, and shall surely lend him sufficient for his need in that which he wanted. Now, when I was reading this earlier, I couldn't help but thinking of those slimy individuals that have, but they act like they don't, and act like they're poor and still beg. I couldn't help that because you always have them jakes, man, that use shit to their advantage when they know that they don't need it, that they're good, and they'll still take shit from people that they know they don't need. Slimy, grimy motherfuckers, man. I couldn't help it as I was reading this. Open up your hand to the poor and give him what he needs. And I kept thinking about, what about these individuals that they know they don't need it, and they acting like they're poor, but they're really not. It's just a society we've been brought up in, man. It says, beware there be not a thought in thy wicked heart, saying, the 7th year, the year of release is at hand, and thine eye be evil against thy poor brother, and thou givest him naught, and he cry unto the Lord. We were reading this in the book of James, against thee, and it be sin unto thee. So now the rich men today would be who? The international banking families. And that's just an accumulation. Outside of the thefts and the murders, the rapes and everything else, the wages being kept back by fraud, the laborers crying, reaping the vineyard and crying because of their wages. All of this is constantly going before the ears of the Lord. It says, thou shalt surely give him, and thine heart shall not be grieved when thou givest unto him. Because that for this thing the Lord thy power shall bless thee in all thy works, and in all that thou puttest thine hand unto. For the poor shall never cease out of the land. Therefore I command thee, saying, thou shalt open thine hand wide unto thy brother, to thy poor, and to thy needy in thy land. Yeah, and a lot of these laws were enacted, especially when it came to things of this nature, for the poor. Now in the kingdom of heaven, there ain't going to be any poor among the Israelites, because everything's going to be set back in its proper order. We're going to be royalty back in our land. So royalty is not going to suffer poverty. It says, and if thy brother, an Hebrew man or an Hebrew woman, be sold unto thee, and serve thee 6 years, then in the 7th year thou shalt let him go free from thee. Yeah, because at one point or another someone falls into such heavy debt that they were be forced to give themselves over into captivity, their land and everything. But then every 7 years they were supposed to be released, and their land's supposed to be released with them. And you also had the year of Jubilee, which was every 50 years. That was like the heaviest, one. But every 7 years you had a year of release. It says, and when thou sendest him out free from thee, thou shalt not let him go away empty. Yeah, because you're supposed to furnish this man that worked for you for those 6 years, or this woman, with everything that they need in order for them to start all over again. And they will have so much substance that they would be able to hire servants and all of that, and be good to go. That was supposed to be the cycle. But Jake and their wickedness, boy. Thou shalt furnish him liberally, out of thy flock, and out of thy floor, and out of thy winepress, of that wherewith the Lord thy power hath blessed thee, thou shalt give unto him. And thou shalt remember that thou was a bondman in the land of Egypt, and the Lord thy power redeemed thee. Therefore I command thee this thing today. And it shall be, if he say unto thee, I will not go away from thee, because he loveth thee and thine house, because he is well with thee, then thou shalt take an awl, and thrust it through his ear unto the door, and he shall be thy servant forever. And also unto the maidservant thou shalt do likewise. And this is why Esau is doing that today with the microchip. That is the modern day awl, the microchip. That is what they plan on using to make perpetual slaves of people, because they know that the average person out there is in debt, and instead of releasing them like the scriptures say, which they claim they believe in the scriptures, what do? They put you further and further in debt so that you can be dependent upon them. And that's why people that's in the system, welfare system and all that, they're when the time comes for them to receive that mark of the beast, they're going to take it because they're going to want those benefits. All right, so let's go to Deuteronomy 15 and 17. So I want to pull out that word all. The word all. It's maratazai, all boring instrument. And if you type in an all into the Google or whatever search engine you have, you'll see that it looks like an ice pick. And what that was used to do, it was used to take an individual that was going to be a servant, a perpetual servant for life, and you would take him to the door before the judges, and you would take that awl or that ice pick looking thing, and you would puncture his ear, and that would signify that this man is your servant forever. And that's what Esau plans to do with that microchip. That's why the awl, when you bring it up into future prophecy as the mark of the beast, or the karaks, the root word of karagma goes into what? That needle that punctures the skin to insert that microchip, which is the mark, the charagma. You see? And what does that do? That makes you a perpetual servant, a perpetual slave, allows your master to track you, to control your everything, your every transaction, your everything. So you become a total servant, a total slave to the international banking families. All right. I wanted to look up another word, which is the word ibad, which is servant, slave, servant, right? Now, when you go back, there was another word here, ever, forever. Ilam or iwalam, long duration, antiquity, futurity, forever, ever, everlasting. So, iwalam could be an age, a certain period of time, or it could be perpetuity, for a longer period of time. So pretty much as long as you were alive or that master was alive, you were that master's slave. And that's what Esau's doing with this so-called New World Order. And every time you look in the world, you look at those old movies, whether you go back to the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, so on and so forth, every movie that you watch of the future, which had a dystopian future for people, you're seeing all of those things play out right now on the planet Earth. The same way as it was. Restrictions, tighter legislations, more regulations, stranglehold on the people's freedoms, on their rights, so on and so forth. And as we speak right now, a brother sent me an article earlier this morning that they're saying that Biden didn't win Pennsylvania and some other states, so everything is starting to look like it's on the reversal. It's starting to look like it's still in the open. And when I saw that shit, I said, man, this is nothing but a shit show. And I actually looked that term shit show up, and it pretty much means, like a situation that something is thrown in there to make chaos out of it. You can type it in when you want, when you get a chance, type in what does shit show mean. And that's what it means in so many words. Something that's thrown in the mix to create chaos. And that's all it is a big shit show. And why are they doing this? Because they got the minds of the people occupied with bullshit, while they behind the scenes are putting in the last few screws and the last nails in the coffin of the New World Order. All right, so going back to Deuteronomy 15, the last verse is 18. It shall not seem hard unto thee when thou sentest him away free from thee, for he hath been worth a double hired servant to thee, and serving thee 6 years, and the Lord thy power shall bless thee in all that thou doest. But these devils are not trying to do that. They're trying to keep perpetual slaves forever. Now let's go from there to Isaiah 14. I don't think we're going to get through all these precepts. Isaiah chapter 14. Isaiah chapter 14 and 4. It says that thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and say, how have the oppressors ceased? The golden city ceased. And when you look up that word golden city, let me see. There's a precept there, number 3, for verse 4. It says, exactress of gold. And we read what the word exact means. It means to demand. Now let's look up the word exact, which we did before in the offline dictionary. The word exact, because the word exact could be precise. Let's see, claim as due or just. Yeah, so that's to exact, claim as due or just. So you owe so and so and such, and if you don't pay, then you're going to be locked up. And in the case of, like the mob and individuals like that, they send out the leg breakers, the collectors, the bone crunchers, the heavy pipe hitting individuals to come collect that debt. And that's what the IRS is. The IRS, their agents are nothing more than goons for the international banking families. You could call them the leg breakers of the international banking families, because they go out to collect knowing, well, some of them don't know, but some of them do know that what they're doing is illegal. That there's really no law in the book that makes you to pay taxes. Taxes were really set up for income. you know, not for wages. Wages and income are two separate terms. When you look that up, there was a case law years ago. I can't remember the name of the case law as of right now, but that case law, it actually defined and stated that income and wages were two separate things. Income is money or capital invested to make more money. So the money that you make off of the investment, that's income. Wages are payment for labor. Two separate words, two separate meanings, nothing to do with each other. But these devils lumped it all together into one, based off of the liberty tax of World War II, which was a liberty tax set up to collect money from the average citizen in order to help fund the war, and after the war it was supposed to be let go, but they kept it. These devils are very treacherous, man. So it goes on to say, the Lord hath broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. Yeah, because your power is really broken. So you're living on borrowed times. You know, that's what the scripture said. We would have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Now let's go from there. Let's go to, I'm going to go back to Proverbs 27. I'm sorry, 22 and 7. Because there's another precept I want to bring right after that one. Because this sets it up lovely. Proverbs 22 and 7. The rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. So the borrower is servant to the lender, which means that the one that borrows is in constant debt to the person that's lending. The lender being these international banking families who have manipulated the world by setting up their central banks, which each country has a right to print their own money and regulate the value of that money. But here comes the international bankers with their fuckery, you know, and just pretty much bamboozled the world. All right, this is Baruch 3 and 8. Behold, we are yet this day in our captivity, which we still are, where thou hast scattered us for a reproach and a curse. And we're still under these curses. It says, and to be subject to payments according to all the iniquities of our fathers which departed from the Lord our power. So we're still subject to payments. We're still literal slaves, subjects to the ones that are in power, to the ones that are ruling. All right, now let's go from there to Deuteronomy 24 and 10. Deuteronomy 24 and 10. I'm going to read a couple of verses here, and then we get ready to close out. It says, when thou dost lend to thy brother, when thou dost lend thy brother anything, thou shalt not go into his house to fetch his pledge. And what do these devils do in the IRS when you don't pay? They come in and seize all your assets. The scriptures say when somebody owes you something, you ain't supposed to go into their house and take that pledge. And what is that pledge? Collateral. Because whenever you take a loan out, what do they ask for? Collateral. And the collateral comes in the form of something tangible, whether it's a home, whether it's land, whether it's a vehicle, bicycle, gold, silver, whatever it is that you have that is of value to them, in case you default on the loan and they have to come and salvage whatever they can based off of whatever they take from you for collateral. That's a pledge. So when you pledge something, they're not supposed to come and ransack your house and take your shit. You're supposed to bring it out to them. It says, but what do the IRS do? They come and bust into your house and take your shit. It says, thou shalt stand abroad, and the man to whom thou dost lend shall bring out the pledge abroad unto thee. And if the man be poor, so now here it is, you have a man that's poor. In the poorhouse, I keep thinking about Red Fox, where they came and they just stripped everything of them. They took the jewelry off of them. I mean, they just stripped everything. I forgot exactly how he said it. Somebody help. So this is something, I forget the words that he used, but it was just like heartless, you know. And it ain't supposed to be that way, because if you fall in decay, right, it says, and if the man be poor. Matter of fact, since I mentioned that word decay, I believe we just read that, if I'm not mistaken, in Deuteronomy, the 15th chapter. But let me just make sure, because if we did, I'm not going to go back there. No, we actually didn't read that yet. You know what? Let me read it anyway, because that was further down in the lesson, but I don't know if we're going to get to that. So let me just read that. This is Leviticus 25:35. And if thy brother be waxen poor and fallen in decay with thee, then thou shalt relieve him. Yea, though he be a stranger, meaning someone that came from a foreign land, which was an Israelite, or a sojourner, or somebody that was just staying for a couple of days. He might have been from a city in the land of Benjamin or in the land of Naphtali or whatever, that he may live with thee, see, for that time being. So that's, that's what would have to be done, because at one point or another, everyone has fallen on hard times. And that's where the Lord had certain laws and sub-laws in place to help relieve the poor. But what does this devil do? He exploits the poor even more. So it says back in Deuteronomy 24:12, and if the man be poor, thou shalt not sleep with his pledge. Right, and the pledge will come in the form, usually sometimes the person would be so poor that all they had to pledge was the clothes on their back. And the person that they owed the money to would take the clothes off of their back. A good movie to watch for that is A Knight's Tale. The one dude that was a very great orator, but he was just a fucking degenerate gambler, and they would take his clothes. He'd be walking butt naked, because that's all he had was the clothes on his back. So it says, and if the man be poor, thou shalt not sleep with his pledge. In any case, thou shalt deliver him the pledge again when the sun goeth down, that he may sleep in his own raiment, and bless thee, and it shall be righteous unto thee before the Lord thy power. See? But these devils, they'll take everything you have and won't give you shit. And they'll take it by force. They'll hurt you. Even Aaron Russo said that. So listen, you're not supposed to pay your taxes, but I'm not saying for you not to pay your tax, because you might get hurt. Because these devils don't play by the rules, man. So let's see what else we got. Let's go to Exodus 22. There's only a couple of verses in that one, so that'll be cool. Exodus 22 and 25 to 27. It says, if thou lend money to any of my people that is poor by thee, thou shalt not lend to him, thou shalt not be to him as a usurer, neither shalt thou lay upon him usury. What's usury? Interest. What does Esau do? They charge you interest whenever they loan you something. Whenever you take out a loan, whenever you finance something, is always interest tacked onto it. Whenever you get a credit card so that you can build up your credit, they always tack on what? Interest against the scriptures. Because the reason why a person is taking a loan is because they need it, because they're poor. It says, if thou at all take thy neighbor's raiment to pledge, thou shalt deliver it unto him by that the sun goeth down. For that is his covering only. It is his raiment for his skin, wherein shall he sleep. And it shall come to pass when he crieth unto me that I will hear, for I am gracious. See? And that's what we read in the book of James, the 5th chapter, that those that reap down your labor, and the labor is by you kept back by fraud, they cry, and the cries of them are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. And the Lord is going, he hears, and he's going to deal with you, he's going to judge you. All right. Now let's go to Matthew 18. We'll make this the last one. I had a couple more precepts, but we'll make this the last one. Matthew 18, and I'll try to get through a couple of verses there and close the lesson out. Matthew 18 and 23. Now, this parable here, keep in mind, this is a parable that Yahushua is using. He's using the creditor, the borrower, debtor, lender scenario for a parable to signify a debtor, meaning someone that commits iniquity and sin against the Most High. So he's using the scenario or parabolic talk of lending and borrowing, you know, one that is in debt and being forgiven debt and all of that good stuff, to portray that if you don't forgive, you know, your brother, the Lord ain't gonna forgive you. But the point of the matter is, it's still dealing with a financial business that actually happens, you know. And there are times when you're supposed to be forgiven of a debt, an actual debt, you know, and some people don't do that. So let's go Matthew 18 and let's start at 23. It says, therefore is the kingdom of heaven likened unto a certain king, which would take account of his servants. See? And when he had begun to reckon, because that's what, you know, you do when you take into accounting, you know, you lend money out, and then you say, you know what, such and such, this person, their account is about due, their loan is about due, so let me send them a letter or send somebody to them to find out what the progress is in the payment. It says, one was brought unto him, which owed him 10,000 talents. So this man was in heavy debt. He said, but for as much as he had not to pay, his Lord commanded him to be sold. And that was the case. Oh man, Dan, that was a scripture. Did I miss? Oh man. Oh Lord. You know what? I'm gonna jump from here because this is one we must get. Because I had skipped over this earlier because, you know, we were, you know, going in the spirit. So if we get time, which I don't think we are, I'll read this one instead. 7 verses long. 2 Samuel 4 and 1. And when Saul, 2 Kings 4 and 1. 2 Kings 4 and 1. Now there cried a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets unto Elisha, saying, thy servant my husband is dead, and thou knowest that thy servant did fear the Lord, and the creditor is come to take unto him my 2 sons to be bondsmen. Why? Because she didn't have money to pay the debt because her husband was dead. See? So what happened? The creditors were coming and she had nothing else to pledge. She had nothing else to give them. So they were coming for what? For her sons. And this is what debt slavery is all about. And this is what this so-called national debt, this world debt is all about. Making perpetual slaves of the people so that the international bankers can get some kind of payment for the money that they've lent out. Wrongly at that. So it says, and Elisha said unto her, what shall I do for thee? Tell me, what hast thou in the house? And she said, thine handmaid hath not anything in the house save a pot of oil. Then he said, go, borrow thee vessels abroad of all thy neighbors, even empty vessels borrow, not a few. And when thou art come in, thou shalt shut the door upon thee and upon thy sons, and shalt pour out into all those vessels, and thou shalt set aside that which is full. So she went in, so she went from him and shut the door upon her and upon her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured out. And it came to pass, when the vessels were full, that she said unto her son, bring me yet a vessel. And he said unto her, there is not a vessel more. And the oil stayed. So that one thing of oil she had, all of those empty vessels that were brought to her, she filled them all. But the vessel that she was pouring from never wasted. So now listen to what Elisha told her. He said, then she came and told the man of the Most High, and he said, go, sell the oil, and pay thy debt, and live thou and thy children of the rest. So in other words, she was able to pay that debt without having to have her sons to be sold as slave men. And this is the whole scenario of it, that creditors, after they lend, after a certain period of time, they're going to want their money. They're going to want their profit. They're going to call in their loans. And that's what we're at the point at right now, for them to call in their loans. And this is why they're pushing this New World Order agenda so fast and heavy with the vaccines, because that's all leading to what? Towards the mark of the beast. Integrating everything into the system of a digital system, so that everything could be in place when they set up the mark of the beast. You know? And that's what it is, which is the microchip, where they'll have everything on that chip, and the person can be forgiven of whatever debt they have if they take that chip. See? So these devils have the market cornered. You know, they're on the prowl, they're moving. I had a couple more precepts, you know, but you know, it's pretty much dealing on the financial tip, you know. And I think pretty much, you know, the point is made as far as, you know, that debt slavery, you know. You should read, you know, those of you brothers that's interested in learning more about it, read about Joseph and the dream that the Pharaoh had, you know, the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine. And read about how the Egyptians actually made themselves servants unto the Pharaoh under the orders of Joseph. Why? Because they were in debt. They had spent all their money on food, and they had nothing left but themselves and their lands, and they sold themselves and their lands to be servants under Pharaoh. And from that point on, they had to pay 5% of everything that they had. See? So these devils know exactly what they're doing with this debt slavery, and that's why they put the first central bank in America back in, I believe it was the 1800s, if I'm not mistaken. No, I think it was the 1700s. Then that failed. They had a war. Then they put in the next bank, central bank, the second central bank, which was the late 1700s into the 1800s. And then when that was not renewed, they had the War of 1812, which was a banking war. And then after that, about 100 years later, they established the Federal Reserve, which was the third central bank, but it was set up under the guise of a so-called federal entity, which is not. And that's how they had the whole world, you know, in a vice grip of debt. And they're using that debt to push forward their agenda. You know, so with that, you know, I pray that you brothers have been edified. Till the next time I say, Shalom.